I am enthusiastic, delighted, and honored to be here today to give you a full presentation, one I have given in the past many different events in person. The presentation's all about exploring the mysteries of the goddess Babalon. This is an adaptation of the lecture I gave in person to a number of different pagan conferences, and I'm excited to bring it to an online format so it can reach a broader audience. My goal is to empower you as a scholar, as a practitioner, as a dabbler, whatever the case may be, to have a firm foundation in understanding this particular aspect of Babalon, in particular a historical perspective in the tradition known as Thelema, but we also get into some other things. So whether or not you're an absolute beginner or you want to refresh some thoughts you have, join me today as I give a lecture all about the goddess Babalon and equip you with some background information, sure, to give you more context to have a more meaningful practice and a more meaningful path along your studies. So I would now like to set the tone of this talk by reading to you an excerpt about the goddess Babalon from a sacred text known as Liber Heth. This is the secret of the Holy Grail. That is the sacred vessel of Our Lady, the Scarlet Woman. Babalon, the mother of abominations, the bride of chaos, that rideth upon our Lord the Beast. Thou shalt drain out thy blood, that is thy life, into the golden cup of her fornication. Thou shalt mingle thy life with the universal life. Thou shalt keep not back one drop. So, again, that gives you a little taste. Oh, and by the way, that artwork is actually me, portraying Babalon in a series of devotional or artistic photographs I did. So let's talk about where I'm going with this presentation today. This presentation is both a scholarly and practical one. You will leave after watching that with the historical context that will enrich your understanding of Babalon, but it's also applicable in ways to approach her as a goddess. I have chosen to focus the topic of conversation today around the occult and esoteric significance of Babalon. Although I do talk about the Babalon with a Y from the historical context of the Bible, I do not dwell on it, and I feel that if you want easy access information to the Bible, that's out there. But these other esoteric texts, which will be the focus of this presentation, are much more harder to find, understand, and get into. So let's dive into it. And before we dive into it, I want to talk about who I am. I really struggled to talk about who I am, but I'm a new face on the scene. A lot of people are just now getting to know me for the first time. Welcome. Hello, I'm Mavius Lynn. As you can see on your screen, I'm a writer and I've made a lot of educational content on YouTube. So I've previously been published in 2 different magazines, and I currently have a book out called The Holy Year of Thelema, which does dive into the topic of Babalon. So if you're interested in a little introduction to the tradition and going a little bit deeper, I highly recommend checking out my book. It is suitable for beginners, but I will mention it's a more intermediate level book. As you can see, I have a YouTube channel as well, and I give a lot of lectures in person in my local pagan and witchcraft community. And I don't just talk about magic scholarly, I do it also. I've been initiated into the OTO as well as Temple of the Silver Star. And then on your screen is a picture of me doing Enochian magic as well as some Thelemic magic. So that's a little bit about me and my background as a scholar as well as practitioner. And at the end of the day, I just want people to do magic because I think a little bit of magic is better than none. So, why are we talking about Babalon today? You may have encountered Babalon in various occult spaces. She has certainly been getting more spotlight among the dark divine feminine. But how do these portrayals compare to her original sources? I believe it's worth taking a step back and looking at the origins of Babalon to place her in proper context. This will allow you to unlock a richer understanding and perhaps apply that to your own practice. The mysteries of Babalon are fundamental mysteries to the human condition. She offers an understanding of ourselves and our relationship to the universe. As you tackle the mysteries surrounding sex and death on your spiritual journey, Babalon is waiting for you and her holy grail to offer you immortality. She is all-consuming darkness. She is death. To understand her is to understand the secrets of what it means to be a human. Babalon first made her debut in the Bible as Babylon the Great, or the Whore of Babylon. Note the spelling here of her name with a Y, and this spelling is something we will return to later. In the book of Revelation of the New Testament, Babylon is not only mentioned as a place, but also as a symbolic female figure who is riding a 7-headed beast with 10 horns. She is a whore adorned with precious stones and pearls and holding up a golden cup. On her head was the name Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. The book of Revelation is a prophetic text in Christianity that describes visions of the end times. In this book, the beast in Babylon can be understood as forces of evil and corruption in the world. The exact biblical definition of all this imagery and its meaning varies. I hope it goes without saying that the Latter-day Saint, Catholic, and Protestant views have slightly different takes on her, but I think that covers the general sense of who Babylon is in the Bible. And that is all well and good, until one of our favorite occultists, known as John Dee, was ready to get weird and blow this all up, or, depending on who you ask, expand our understanding of Babylon. So John Dee, the man, the myth, the legend. And I would love to hear from viewers and listeners, have you heard of John Dee before? Please let me know. He's quite common to come across, but not everyone has heard of him. So I'm going to assume some people are hearing this occult figure for the first time, and we're going to talk about it. So John Dee was born in 1527 and was an incredibly brilliant man. He was an English mathematician, astronomer, teacher, occultist, and alchemist. He was also known for being an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. His work laid the foundation for modern science today. In the occult world, he is known especially for his work with angels and the system of Enochian magic, or angelic magic, that he developed. So on your screen, you can see a portrait of John Dee on the right, and on the left is actually a picture of me doing my own Enochian work based on his system of magic. So that's a quick little overview of John Dee. Let's talk more about Enochian magic, and this is important because it's going to give us the foundation we need to understand some of these texts on Babylon. So, Enochian magic, let's dive in. Also, I do have some notes here to keep me on track, because those who know me know I get sidetracked very easily. So, Enochian magic, what is it? Enochian magic is a system of magic developed by John Dee with the help of Edward Kelly. Edward Kelly was an occultist, scryer, and honestly, kind of a sketchy guy. When Edward Kelly came into John Dee's life, he was actually missing an ear. His ear was cut off for punishment of committing forgery. The system of Enochian magic they developed together is a type of ceremonial magic involving rituals meant to evoke angels and other entities. A very important part of this system is a sequence of spiritual planes or realms known as the Enochian Aethers. There is a total of 30 Enochian Aethers. Practitioners can explore all 30 of these realms and encounter angelic or other spiritual entities. You start exploring the Aethers, traditionally speaking, at the lowest one near Earth, numbered number 30. You slowly work your way up the Aethers. The higher you climb, the closer you are to the divine. The closer you are to divinity, the harder the work scrying the Aethers becomes. The highest Aether is located at number 1. The image on your screen is not a depiction of the Enochian Aethers themselves, but it's one I grabbed. It's an engraving that I thought was quite reminiscent of them, And because people often describe the aethers as these concentric spheres emanating outward. And I think this slide I put together gives a good visual vibe of Enochian magic in general. So out of this Enochian system came something called the Enochian language. It is an occult constructed language received from angels by John Dee from his work with Edward Kelly. Dee's journals also refer to this language as angelic, celestial speech, and the language of angels, but it later became more widely known as just Enochian. As a side note, and this is just my opinion here, it's interesting out of this work with the Enochian aethers that John Dee received a language. As a mathematician and cryptographer, it makes sense that his way of understanding or coming close to understanding the ineffable would be linguistic and highly technical. All of the occultists who scry the Enochian aethers seem to get messages from the divine in a shape or form that they understand. Visual artists seem to get shapes, colors, and light. Aleister Crowley, the occultist we will talk much more about in a bit, Aleister Crowley, with his fundamentalist Christian background, when he scried the aethers, got communications in a King Jamesian type language. After all, you cannot expect the divine to communicate with you with a palette of symbols you do not possess or do not know. Usually, the divine communicates in ways that you understand, intentionally so. So, here's a meme I made about what it's like to scry the Enochian aethers, and for what it's worth, I think it kind of encapsulates the mood here. So enjoy that as a brief little pause in my lecturing. So, using this unique Enochian language, during the work with Edward Kelly and John Dee, the word Babalon makes an appearance again, but with a different spelling from the Bible. The first was Babalon, which translated as harlot. The other was Babylon, which means wicked. The discovery of Babylon's name is just the beginning. Our understanding today around the goddess Babalon takes shape around the work of infamous occultist Aleister Crowley. She has a special significance in the religion and philosophy known as Thelemic. So, here we are. I always say, Aleister Crowley is a person a lot of people have very, very strong opinions about. Love him, hate him, feel no sort of way towards him. I encourage you to feel your feelings. I have no interest in telling anyone how to feel about Aleister Crowley. However, I am very interested in providing you with an accurate account of facts grounded in reality as we know them, so that you are empowered to make up your own mind about magic and the occult and this controversial figure known as Crowley. So, in my personal opinion, Crowley, I don't share my personal opinion. That's my personal opinion. And if you want it, you will have to find me outside of the internet and ask me in person. I'm more than happy to share that. If people buy me a drink or something like that, I will tell you my actual opinion about Crowley. But we're going to put all that aside and focus on the fact that his work is an essential component to the goddess Babalon. She exists very important and very distinctly in the tradition known as Thelemic. And before we continue, there's obviously pictures of Aleister Crowley on your screen, and this picture of Aleister Crowley in red here, this famous one of him doing this symbol, that's not just him being a quirky guy. It's actually a very specific magical gesture. His tradition known as Thelemic is full of magical words and gestures used in ritual, and this is one of them known as the sign of Vir. And also the garment he is wearing, although the original picture is in black and white, this picture has been recolored to look more accurate to how the original garment looks. And again, the robe is black in a black and white image, but the original color of this garment is actually red. And it is not a hat, it is a robe. So it is a robe used in his magical teaching order known as the AA. So now that we've got that under wraps, let's dive into it further. Who was Aleister Crowley? Aleister Crowley lived a colorful and controversial life. He was a world traveler, mountain climber, poet, spy, writer, yogi, philosopher, painter, occultist, and prophet of a religious movement. He was relentlessly painted as a villain during his life. Some of the hostility he experienced was from the fact he was an iconoclast and didn't fit the mold of respectable Victorian Christian society. He was a promiscuous and queer man, and kinky at a time when that could land you in jail. As a queer man, however, he forged a path forward and made sense of the world using the occult. His lifelong study and discoveries made in the occult were a sharp deviation from the very strict Christian fundamentalist group he was raised in, known as the Plymouth Brethren. Crowley was a voracious reader, and eventually he became very skeptical of Christianity. Eventually, he joined an occult order known as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and his interest in magic was solidified. And that eventually led to him exploring the works of John Dee and this Enochian system of magic, which will pop back up later. Obviously, Crowley was a man far from perfect. He was just a human being. And the tradition known as Thelema, that religion and philosophy he sort of gave birth to and helped push forward, love it or hate him as a person, he is not Thelema Jesus. People don't seek to emulate to be him in the tradition. But he did give us a lot of very valuable things. And quite frankly, in the broader witchcraft spaces, it's hard to find something that was not touched by the work of Aleister Crowley. He gave us a great deal of stuff, and to practice magic today, it's very hard to not find something that was deeply influenced by his religion, his thoughts, and his occult work. So on your screen is another meme I made. This includes his influence on Gerald Gardner and Wicca, his influence on Evangeline Adams and her popularization of the pop culture astrology stuff. His work gave birth to the Thoth Tarot and eventually modern satanic movements like the Church of Satan, and a lot of other things. So that's just a little taste of what we owe to Crowley for context. And now that we're talking about Crowley, let's talk about something very important. And it's that all of Aleister Crowley's work is not equal. Crowley spent his life doing a bunch of different things and producing a bunch of different types of work. We need to understand the differences between these things before we can appreciate the context of his work concerning Our Lady Babalon. Obviously, not everything the dude wrote is on your screen in that slide, not even close. These are just some examples in the category he did. So he wrote fiction, he wrote poetry, he wrote a ton of occult instructions, and he also did this other category of a thing. He channeled text. He channeled the divine. And let's talk more about that. So first, before we dive into the channeled portion of his work, I do have a little note here because I thought it'd be interesting for people, and that is his magical poetry. So as a magical act, Aleister Crowley did a bunch of things to oppose the rise of fascism in World War II. And he was not only working as a spy for British intelligence, he was also writing wartime poetry to oppose fascism, and he also published this document on your screen, known as Liber Oz, as a declaration of human rights. So he was out here doing things, one of which was opposing authoritarianism and opposing fascism. So for those of you who have not personally done occult work, channeling, or scrying, this is going to be an unfamiliar concept for you, so bear with me, let's talk about it. A channeled text is one where a spirit, entity, or deity, or otherwise inaccessible part of your subconscious speaks through you. The art or writing that comes from a channeled communication is something that flows through you. You may be the one expressing the message through art or writing, but the words are not yours. You are not the author. You are simply the messenger. An example of a channeled work would be the holy books of the tradition known as Thelema. So there's a collection of texts Aleister Crowley produced in his life known as the Holy Books of Thelema. These are channeled works, meaning Aleister Crowley was not the author of these. Crowley was simply the hand that wrote them down. As far as Thelema goes, people are often surprised to hear that we have holy books in the tradition of Thelema, and yes, we absolutely do, and these holy books make up the spine of this tradition. That's where we get all of our stuff. It goes back to those original channeled works. So not only do we have channeled works, but we also have a classification system, and Our Lady Babalon's appearance in these holy books are extremely important, and it sheds light on who she is and informs her role in Thelemic mysticism. So this is why we are talking about these holy books right now, and why I'm emphasizing them, because if you don't know what these works are or what they're doing or where they came from, you can't appreciate what Babalon is doing in them and where she comes from. So this is the part where people typically mentally check out, so don't check out, check back in. I won't dwell on this. I actually have a whole nother YouTube video that gets into the classification of the holy books. I just want you to be aware of that. All of Aleister Crowley's work can be classified here, and Class A texts are the holy books we're talking about. There's also a fantastic source in the back of the book known as The Wiser Concise Guide to Aleister Crowley. It is a chronological list and exploration of the holy books of Thelema. Also in my own book, The Holy Year of Thelema, there's a fantastic resource in the back of the book where I get into the holy books as well. So that's also available for you. Also, I have further reading in my back of my book. But that's neither here nor there. But I just want you to see this list so you are aware that it exists, and should you wish to further deeper, you can use this as a resource. So let's talk about this first one, and it is the vision and the voice. So the vision and the voice. It is a holy text channeled by Aleister Crowley. It's actually technically an AB text, but what we're most interested is that Class A part. And it is essentially Aleister Crowley doing work scrying the 30 Enochian Aethers. Unlike the complicated work of John Dee and Edward Kelly, they had a lot of different implements to do their scrying of Enochian Aethers. Aleister Crowley did something different. So in order to scry these Aethers, for most of that, he essentially walked through the desert and stared into a crystal known as crystal gazing. And crystal gazing was quite popular during the Victorian era. So he had a really stripped down way of approaching Enochian magic. And he recorded, he scried an Enochian Aether per day, and he recorded what he received. These visions or divine words reflect truths for Aleister Crowley on his own personal initiatory journey, as well as messages for Crowley as the prophet of the Aeon of Horus. That's a lot to unpack. I don't expect everyone to know what those words mean, but if that interests you, definitely look into the idea of aeonic succession. I have another video on that. Hate to recommend my book, but it's also in my book. But again, when I say prophet, I don't mean Thelema Jesus. He was simply a mouthpiece for the divine and truth. So Crowley, in the practice of Thelema, he was scrying these Enochian Aethers, and it contains both his scholarship as well as what he received. Babalon made her big name reveal in Aleister Crowley's The Vision and the Voice, and I will read to you an excerpt from the second Aether. The work of man and his pomp, let them be defaced. That is, in the great work man must lose his personality. His building, let it be a cave for the beast of the field. His building means the vault of the adepts, and the cave is the cave of the mountain of Abiengnus. And the beast is he upon whom Babalon rideth, and the field is the supernal Eden. Confound her understanding with darkness. This sentence is explained by what has been said concerning Bina." End quote. This provides a unique window into a Thelemic understanding of an individual's spiritual progression through the Kabbalistic tree of life. In this understanding, Babalon is not siding with evil, but providing a novel model in her service to humanity. Babalon and her beast are seen as liberators, providing necessary services in the aim of humanity's spiritual advancement towards enlightenment. Let's talk more about how Babalon has the potential to help with the spiritual evolution of the individual. One of the models we use to understand the spiritual evolution of a person is the Kabbalistic tree of life. In this talk, I will not be talking about the Jewish Kabbalistic tree of life. I am talking about the Hermetic Kabbalistic tree of life. Hermetic Kabbalah draws from Jewish Kabbalah, but it is not the same thing. Hermetic Kabbalah expands on the tree of life and incorporates elements of Hermetic philosophy and other mystical elements. Within all the diverse traditions and understandings out there, note that there is more than just one tree of life. The one Aleister Crowley understood and was working with when he came to understand Babalon is on your screen. And the tree of life is represented as a diagram consisting of circles numbered 1 to 10. These circles are divine emanations through which the transcendent God or divinity can manifest from Kether down to our physical world here in Malkuth. Thus, these places among the spiritual path, as represented by those circles, are called the Sephiroth. The emanation of the Sephiroth can be envisioned as a flash of lightning raining down from the ocean of endless light, also known as Ein Sof Or. The goal of the initiate in this tradition is to travel up the tree of life from Malkuth to Kether and to return spiritually to this divine light of God. So that is known as the great work. It's one of the great goals of the spiritual path of Thelema and many other traditions. But this understanding involving Babalon that came from Crowley scrying the Enochian Aether is quite unique to Thelema. So Bina is one of the 10 Sephiroth on the Tree of Life. Babalon, as a goddess, is associated with Bina. Dan Gunther, who is a notable modern Thelemite, rest in peace to him, asserts that Babalon is a name of Bina in her capacity as Bride of the Beast, Redeemer of the world, end quote. Bina is part of the 3 highest Sephiroth, representing the highest spiritual realm known as the Supernal Triad. Kether is the point from which all creation emanates. The part of the soul that resides in Bina is called the Neshama. The Neshama gives shape and meaning to this life force emanating from Kether. It is through Bina that the understanding or contemplation of that life force is expressed. One of the spiritual progressions one must go through on this particular model of the Tree of Life is one must travel from Chesed, known as Mercury, to Bina, understanding. If you notice the Tree of Life, that there is no direct path connecting these two. That is because one must pass through the veil of the abyss. Here lies an empty space or slot known as Dot. Dot is not one of the other Sephiroth. This void separates the first 3 Sephiroth known as from the lower 6. In order to move through Dot, from a Thelemic understanding, you must undergo an ordeal known as Crossing of the Abyss. In this ordeal, you must confront and annihilate your ego. Within Thelema, Babalon is extremely important in this initiatory context. It is with her help that Crowley was able to cross the abyss and achieve this egoless point of view available to those who make it across. This is a necessary step towards achieving the grade of Magister Templi in the AA. Again, AA is not Alcoholics Anonymous, it is Aleister Crowley's teaching order. It is a step from a place of being to non-being that requires both faith and will to go through it. To understand the specific demands of the ordeal of the abyss and the role of Babalon within this work, we can return to Liber Heth. So Liber Heth is another Class A holy book in Thelema. It is what I recited to you a short passage from in the beginning of this presentation, and it is an account of the task for those who wish to achieve the grade of exempt adept to achieve the grade of Magister Templii, which is the next step in their spiritual evolution. In other words, this is for the seeker who is wanting to cross the abyss on their way to Bina. So Liber Heth urges those who dare traverse through the abyss and wish to cross it, pour all of their blood into Babalon's Holy Grail. It is instruction to turn over all of yourself, your very essence, over to Babalon in an open embrace of your annihilation. When you give up your individual life, you may then embrace the universal life and move closer to the light of divine truth. You must lose the conscious self and your advancement to the archetypal realm. But wait, there's more. So this step demands complete commitment, and you must be willing to do so with everything you have. Should you hold something back or approach with a divided heart, the consequences are dire. The half-hearted to take this faulty step are dragged down to the endless night of illusion by the demon Choronzon, the demon of the abyss. Choronzon is of the excrement or clip-off in the tree of life. So let's put everything we learned together. Many of you who are amongst the occult milieu out there may have seen or heard about this symbol. Let's talk about it. And we're going to unpack what this meaning of this traditional Star of Babalon means. So the spelling of Babalon with an A, as we talked about, allows it to be translated into the number 156 using isopsophy. Isopsophy is a Greek method of assigning numerical values to letters and then seeing what related ideas connect to that number. 156 is Babalon's number and is a number portrayed on the star on your screen. Within this image, if you add up the two 77s on the right and left, you get 154. Then you add the 7 and 7 on the top, you get 14. 14 divided by the 7 on the bottom is 2. When you finally add together 154 and 2, you get 156. So that symbol has a little bit of mathematics involved. For mathematically minded folks, here is that written out. So, in the words of Aleister Crowley, quote, "The formula 156 is constant copulation or samadhi on everything," end quote. The Sanskrit word samadhi means to bring together. In Buddhism, samadhi is the 8th element of the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the final teaching of Buddha's Four Noble Truths. Progression through the ordeal of the abyss with the aid of Babalon, in some sense, is a reach for truth and light of ultimate reality. It is absorption into the universal life. And Aleister Crowley, in his various work, later connects the idea of the Scarlet Woman to Babalon. And so in the tradition of Thelema, we have this idea of the Scarlet Woman as a spiritual office in relation to the spiritual office of the beast. So this is not a title for everyone to take. It's a very, according to Aleister Crowley, it's a very distinct spiritual office. And we understand the progression of humankind through this idea of aeons, and the current aeon was ushered in by a celestial event known as the Equinox of the Gods, ushered in and helped to bring about that energy by these particular spiritual offices. So the woman on your screen, let's talk about her. She is Rose Edith Kelly. We owe the founding of the Book of the Law and Thelema in general, thanks to her as well as Aleister Crowley. And she was the first Scarlet Woman. So there was a number of Scarlet Women who held this office during Aleister Crowley's life. And it's a spiritual office held in relation to the spiritual office of the Beast. What this role of Scarlet Woman means today means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Some people consider it just their magical partner to an initiatrix who specifically serves in a magical formula of some kind during a magical working. But I want to kind of tether the discussion today to the more traditional definition of the Scarlet Woman as someone occupying this spiritual office in relation to the Beast. So just some quick facts on Rose Edith Kelly. She was born in England the 23rd of July, 1874. She was one of 4 children. And, essentially, she really bucked up against standard ideas of social restraint and modesty of the Victorian era. And she eventually, instead of following her parents' wishes of marrying one of the men she had been seeing, she instead got out of that sort of arranged marriage situation and ran off with a complete stranger and friend of her brother's known as Aleister Crowley. So they were complete strangers when they met, and they had a marriage of convenience. And eventually this led to, a series of events led to the reception of the Book of the Law. Although she did not identify as an occultist herself, she was more interested in other things than doing this occult magical work that Crowley was doing. She certainly had a huge hand to play in a lot of the things we have now in this tradition. So here are some of the Scarlet Women as listed by Aleister Crowley in his commentaries on the Book of the Law. He lists the first 7 Scarlet Women that are displayed on your screen. I just want to put this list in front of your eyes. Obviously, there was more Scarlet Women after this, but again, there's some debate because Aleister Crowley did not leave us with a nice, neat list of the Scarlet Women who came after these ladies, but there's the solid list he did leave us. The Scarlet Women are more than just muses. The concept of a muse has historically been one where a woman serves as a passive source of inspiration for a man. The Scarlet Woman takes an active role as a force of change and a conduit for the current aeonic power. The women who filled this role of Scarlet Woman were far from the passive norm of Victorian society. They were educated and challenged the stereotypical feminine mold. So, let's talk about the Book of the Law. This central sacred holy text of Thelema gives us the Scarlet Woman. It first outlines this idea of the Scarlet Woman, and it also gives us a job description of her. Now, the reason we're talking about the Scarlet Woman is because Aleister Crowley connected the idea of the Scarlet Woman, as outlined in the Book of the Law, to the goddess Babalon. Babalon does not make an appearance in this first holy text, the Book of the Law. Again, this is a connection Crowley made later. So let's get into what exactly the Book of the Law says about this spiritual office connected to Babalon. So here's a direct quote from this holy text. Quote, "Let the Scarlet Woman beware. If pity and compassion and tenderness visit her heart, if she leave my work to toy with old sweetness, then shall my vengeance be known. I will slay me her child. I will alienate her heart. I will cast her out from men as a shrinking and despised harlot. Shall she crawl through dusk-wet streets and die cold and an-hungered. But let her raise herself in pride. Let her follow me in my way. Let her work the work of wickedness. Let her kill her heart. Let her be loud and adulterous. Let her be covered with jewels and rich garments. And let her be shameless before all men. Then will I lift her to pinnacles of power. Then will I breed from her a child mightier than all the kings of the earth. I will fill her with joy. With my force shall she see and strike at the worship of Nu. She shall achieve Hadit." End quote. So the Scarlet Woman in this particular spiritual office is called to embrace her sexuality, reject societal expectations of modesty and monogamy, and live with confidence and pride. Her adornment of jewels and rich garments can be seen as a fearless expression of self-celebration. Now, of course, how you interpret this holy text is best done in reference to Aleister Crowley and his commentaries, and it's ultimately up to you and what this means to you. My quotes here and thoughts here are coming from Crowley, filtered through the me lens, but those are just some ideas of what he was talking about. And then, of course, we have Phyllis Seckler, also known as Sora Merrill. She was an important occultist and writer who shared some of her perspective of Scarlet Women. In other words, in terms of the lineage of magical ancestors, as a practitioner of Thelema myself, Phyllis Seckler is one of these people, and we owe her a lot. And here's her quote concerning it, quote, "Jewels and rich garments can also refer to the accomplishments of the Scarlet Woman. She is without shame before all men because she now has pride in herself," end quote. And I want to also point out to you in that photo, the symbol behind Phyllis Seckler's head is something that should look familiar to you. It's the Star of Babylon combined with some other stuff, which makes it specifically the symbol of the teaching order known as the AA. Yeah, let's talk about the Scarlet Woman. So, Phyllis Seckler was not a Scarlet Woman. Not every woman in Aleister Crowley's life was a Scarlet Woman. Now, every Scarlet Woman who held that office did have a romantic and sexual relationship with Aleister Crowley, but not every relationship Crowley had meant that person was a Scarlet Woman. Something I say is sometimes a date with Aleister Crowley was just a date with Crowley. So let's talk about the fact our friend here, Phyllis Seckler, and those other women were not Scarlet Women. So, Scarlet Women, traditionally speaking, is a distinction given by a woman who held a very specific spiritual office in relation to the beast. Me, as a woman, person in the world and practicing Thelemite, do not consider myself a Scarlet Woman. In fact, if someone were to call me that, I would be super confused and, depending on the context, possibly offended. So when I read the directions laid out in this book of the law, I don't read them as instructions for me personally. They're instructions for a spiritual office I have no aspirations to possess. I am in charge of my own spiritual journey, discovering and doing my will in this world, and I'm not put in charge of ushering in the new aeon in that capacity. Now, that caveat being said, of course, people today have a variety of different interpretations around this and like to sometimes use Scarlet Woman as a nickname for their girlfriend, but I want you to understand that this is not traditional and not all Thelemites do have such a casual usage of this term. And I want to emphasize the fact that there is no right way to be a Thelemite woman other than to know and do your will. Women, and Thelemite women in particular, are as diverse as the people on this planet. We are in all different types of relationships, including monogamous ones, and we dress modestly or immodestly, however we want, and we seek to live our lives in a way that honors who we are. In the words of Thelema, we seek to do thy will. We traverse the spiritual path in our own way, just as men do. We seek the light of gnosis and the divine in no less a meaningful way than anyone else. And we certainly do not exist as an accessory or tool for male practitioners. We are our own people. And this should not be a radical assertion, but apparently it is. On your screen, there's a few images. There's one of me. Got it back. Here we go. There we go. I'm confused because I'm looking at things opposite on my screen. But yeah, so there's me in a towel robe with some magical implements. There's a unicursal hexagram out of stained glass that I made. And just an image, a lovely image I got off of the internet with permission, of course, of a woman enjoying the sun and the sunset. So, yeah. So, all exploration of Babylon does not stop with the Scarlet Woman. She also makes an appearance in a variety of different types of rituals, one of which is the Gnostic Mass, as well as one of them also is modern day practitioners and altars. So this picture on your screen is actually a beautiful altar from a more modern perspective, I would say, found in a bookshop in Oregon, the United States. And this Babalon altar is super interesting. It's found at Dark Star Magic. If any of you all are up that way and want to check it out, I did. And I was super surprised to see that actually some of the art I did to raise money for a organization actually ended up here. So that picture on your screen, yeah, there we go. This one right here. I'm using my mouse to point to it. That's actually me, and that was my artwork. So if you ever go to Dark Star Magic and you visit their Babalon altar, say hi to me too. But I'm so honored and so excited to see my work displayed there. So let's talk about it. So the Gnostic Mass, we're going to talk about three more things: the Gnostic Mass, Jack Parsons, and Kenneth Grant. So the Gnostic Mass is a ritual that has Babalon in it. That's me again in front of the high altar used in the Gnostic Mass. So in 1913, while traveling through Moscow, Russia, Crowley wrote a ritual known as Liber 15, also known as the Gnostic Mass. It's one of the public-facing rituals performed by the OTO. Which is, again, a paramasonic group that Aleister Crowley was an important member of. And as a part of the OTO, there is something called the EGC, or Ecclesiastica Gnostica Catholica, that performs this ritual, oftentimes publicly for the general public. You do not have to be a member to come to public performances of the Gnostic Mass, but they also sometimes perform private versions of this as well. So in this ritual, the secrets of sex magic are openly displayed as ritual theater. But do note, there is not literal sex happening in this ritual. It is a magical and metaphorical union. What is particularly interesting for us is that Babalon makes an appearance in this ritual. And I want to recite part of the Gnostic Creed for you now, the part concerning Babalon. Quote, "I believe in one secret and ineffable Lord, and in one star in the company of stars of whose fire we are created, and to which we shall return. And in one Father of life, mystery of mystery, in his name Chaos, the sole vice-regent of the sun upon the earth, and in one air, the nourisher of all that breathes. And I believe in one earth, the mother of us all, and in one womb wherein all men are begotten and wherein they shall rest, mystery of mystery, in her name, Babalon," end quote. And it goes on, but I will let you interpret that as you want. And after Crowley, so again, that was just a little taste of Thelemic ritual and the usage of Babalon, sort of historically speaking. And so after Crowley, there was a few other notable occultists I want to put on your radar who did work with Babalon and I think are noteworthy. People often ask me, how can I attend a Gnostic Mass? Go to the website for US people. That's the OTOUSA.org site, but there is an international one as well. So check it out if you want. All right, so notable occultists. Let's talk. First one is Jack Parsons. So Jack Parsons was a rocket engineer, chemist, and Thelemite occultist whose occult work most notably involved the Babalon working. Parsons was born in 1914, and he was an incredibly ambitious scientist and also occultist. Many considered his work in both areas reckless. Though he never directly met Aleister Crowley during his lifetime, they did have correspondences, and Crowley was not a fan of some of his reckless occult work. After being initiated into the 9th degree of OTO and given full access to the sex magic techniques, Parsons sought to summon an elemental as a mate in the form of a woman. He basically was trying to get a girlfriend with magic. After he did this working out of the Mojave Desert, he returned back to his home, and that was when Marjorie Cameron arrived. To Parsons, she was the spirit he had summoned. So let's talk about Marjorie Cameron. So Marjorie Cameron, who is pictured on your screen sitting next to Jack Parsons, she was more than a muse. She would become later a major force in California counterculture movement, and she had some notable appearances amongst Kenneth Anger's films, not to mention being a potent magician and artist herself. So, here's some of her artwork on your screen. Two really interesting, beautiful portrayals. The one on the right is her portrayal of Jack Parsons, and the one of the left is her Holy Guardian Angel artwork. If you're not familiar with her art, definitely, take time to explore it. I think she's definitely worth your consideration. So, one of the things that came from Jack Parsons' work with Babalon was something called the Book of Babalon. So this wasn't something that Aleister Crowley accepted in the Thelemic canon of holy texts, but Jack Parsons did consider it to be the 4th chapter of the Book of the Law. And it's something a lot of modern Thelemites today find meaning in, and when they do their celebration of the 3 days of the writing of the Book of the Law, which is a celebration holiday in Thelema, they sometimes tack on a 4th day to read the chapter 4 as they consider it. So we got another historical figure I want to dive into, and that's Kenneth Grant. So Kenneth Grant was an occultist, and he also led to the founding of something known as the Typhonian tradition. And it's really his own thing. And his books contain a lot of the writing he did throughout his life as an occultist, as a writer. It contains a lot of fantastical art and sort of a poetic outpouring of the occult from this lens of trying to make you feel something. It's something you experience on an artistic level, not necessarily analytical level. But the interesting thing about him is he does equate the Scarlet Woman and transversely Babalon with Kali, a goddess in Hinduism that is associated with destruction and death. So here's a look at some of Kenneth Grant's works. There's a collection there. I think that's my collection in particular. He also had a big fascination with Lam. This drawing that Aleister Crowley did, he attributed a lot of significance to that. And then here's some artwork of the goddess Kali that Kenneth Grant does connect to, essentially connects to Babalon. Now, obviously, these goddesses are different, but they do occupy this space of the dark divine feminine in their own way. So let's talk practical. Let's wrap up this presentation with some practical considerations and a conversation here. So you have just been inundated with a great deal of history, information, and context. My hope is that it makes your personal spiritual journey more meaningful, whatever that may look like for you. Thelema is not a closed practice. You do not need to be initiated into any organization to give some of our rituals a try or try on some of our spiritual or philosophical beliefs. Babalon exists in service to the spiritual evolution of humankind. However, it is my belief that without the proper knowledge, context, or attainment, working with a goddess whose sole purpose is to bring about your death and destruction is not something to do lightly or disrespectfully. Again, the role of Babalon is in this tradition in crossing the abyss. She's someone you give all of yourself to so that she may completely annihilate you and completely destroy your ego. And it is with that destruction and with that ego death that you may achieve this egoless point of view on this spiritual progression. So I personally continue to see modern interpretations of Babalon that lack this basic understanding of her. For some people, she is just another sexy goddess of love, or even worse, a nurturing mother. Now, Babalon does have a connection to sex, and that's because sex, and in particular the orgasm that comes from sex, is known as the little death. So in that brief moment of orgasm, you achieve an egoless perspective. And that's why she's associated with it. But traditionally speaking, she does not have a discriminatory sense of destruction. She does not destroy and consume as a result of some sort of romantic love and feeling towards people. She is essentially here to kill you. She's here to kill you and release you of your ego. In my opinion, there is no need to water down Babalon into another goddess of love. We have lots of goddesses of love. So if you're someone who is looking to expand your chain, your friendship bracelet chain of gods and your polytheistic worship, I encourage you, however you may approach Babalon, to approach her with respect and the appropriate context in which she emerges from this history. And as I say, let the dark divine feminine remain so. There is no need to water her down, again, into something we already have plenty of goddesses existing in those spaces. And I leave you with this. Should you embark on the path of the great work, may your journey be full of light, and may Babalon utterly annihilate you on your journey home. So with that wraps up my talk on Babalon. I hope that has given you some great historical context to dive into a little bit deeper, to have a sense of what she's doing in Thelemic magic and this tradition, where her name comes from. Again, the Bible, Enochian magic, as well as Thelema, these are going to be your strong foundations. And some of the things that come from that, we got Jack Parsons, we have Kenneth Grant, and such a large diversity of practitioners and different opinions. If you want my opinion and ways to celebrate the holy days of Thelema, including the first night of the prophet and his bride, do check out my book. It's available for sale now. This is again, an intermediate level book, great for beginners, but also great for more advanced practitioners looking to expand their celebrations of the holy days. I appreciate you so much for being here. You all make it worthwhile. As always, I am the center of expression for the primal will to good, and so are you. Thanks so much.